So tonight we have with us Corinne Diserens. Actually, I still don't know how to pronounce correctly your last name.
Perfect. Any pronunciation is fine.
Is it Latin?
Well, yes.
Art and art school?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Great.
So let me read the
Thank you. Can move.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'll read to you a brief biography of Corinne, and then I'll share with you the story. So I'll do the formal stuff and I'll do the serious stuff. So Corinne, if I may just address you by your name, I studied art history and film history at the Sorbonne in Paris, and at the Independent Study Program at the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York. She worked as a curator at the IFAM, it's kind of difficult, the Institute of Modern Art in Valencia. And she also curated the 5th International Biennial of Tirana, Albania, and was director of the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, Bolzano in Italy. Since September 2011, she's been the new director of the École de Recherche Graphique, ERG, or ERG, in Brussels. And she is also the chairwoman of the jury of Académie Schloss Solitude. To give you a little anecdote that gives you perhaps a false access to Corinne, is that so 2 years ago I was invited to go to ERG, to the school. And Corinne tells me, we'll come for a few days, work with the students who sign up to work with you, and then with them you can do an exhibition in the small gallery we have where every few months they have a resident curator. Is that correct? So when I get there, I meet Corinne, welcome. She gives me a very short tour, and then she goes to do her work. And then there I'm with like 3 students and a young curator. So, and for the first couple of days, I almost felt alone. It's like, it's not that I think of myself highly, but I was like, where is everyone? Why am I not being taken care of? So if I needed to build a shelf, I had to run to the local hardware store to get the shelf for the students. But slowly I figured things out, is that this is what the school is. You almost have to invent your tools. I know that there's people take care of it, but I felt alone and I was almost upset. But then I figured things out, and actually it was a fantastic experience to work with the students, to have a small exhibition there. And at the opening, Corinne shows up. It's very interesting how she appears, lets you do the things that you need to do in the school, and then shows up. There's no chaperoning. And over the years, conversation with Corinne, she does seem to have that skill of just like tying things up and then stepping back to let them happen. So I'm very happy we have you here. You can talk about anything you want. And so Corinne just told me that she prefers to, if possible, to have a conversation than to give a lecture. So I think our ears are wide open, so welcome.
So, in fact, what I propose, but we can change everything on the way, it's maybe I wrote a few considerations, but notes, exam. And then we can continue those discussion on those notes, or completely change our subject and go in other questions, like we already had a few questions just walking in. And, but I'm very glad we have someone who knows the history of this school.
I know also the Académie Schloss Solitude because I was there for 1 year.
Oh, you were very
so I know all of those institutions.
Okay, great. Well, So ERG is a school which was founded in 1972. So in Europe, 1972, immediately ring 68, resonance. And in fact, Thierry Deduve, who is a philosopher and cultural study teacher, was teaching in what was called the Institut Saint-Luc, which was run by, historically by Catholic people, like many schools in Europe historically, but which had changed tremendously. And he was asked to open experimental school. In fact, they say if you can think of an experimental school, we finance it. I think already to think that it's a very interesting parameter. First, what today would be this notion of experimental school? And but also the idea that if you are experimental, you get finance. I don't know here in Lebanon, but I can tell you that today in Europe, it's not exactly the configuration we are living, especially with the Bologna system and the bachelor, master, PhD, etc. So that's a first parameter of the school. Then the second parameter is there was like 6 teacher who say, okay, let's do it. Thierry contacted different people from practice to more theoretical, going from anthropology, psychology. I mean, we are in 72, we have also to rephrase that in this time. Semiology was very active. And artists, and so there was 6, 7. A teacher who said, okay, let's create this school. And then they took students from the existing school, almost forcing them. I mean, saying, no, you are in a new school. You are not anymore in this school, you are enrolled. You start with us, a new school. And it was maybe 8 students, 9 students at the beginning. So that, everything was very small. But evidently this school grown, and Thierry stayed only 3-4 years to launch and articulate this new school. But why I'm saying that, it's has still this aura of being for the academic instance and the ministry, the aura of being one of these experimental schools. So in one way we are allowed a lot, because the history is we never understood totally what was happening in ERG, and in one way everybody cultivates that, as a protection. And when I arrived now 4.5 years ago, I could feel this notion of experimentation, and we don't totally understand what's happened in this school, has been like a shelter for many experiences that would not have been forcibly possible if there was not this history behind this configuration. But saying that, when I arrived, this school was a little closed on itself. Closed on itself because there was also some influence of a family, of artists, theoretical people who have been working very long time together, who knows, who have confidence, who have created an active platform, but who had a difficult time also maybe to let other things entering the school and being protective of this experimental history. So for me it was important to kind of try to reopen a question about this history and to bring other people in the school, not at all to put in danger the people who were in, but to have other typology of dialogues for the students too. And at the difference of your department, we are bachelor and master, and but the master were very much the continuation of the bachelor, like almost it was imposed. We had to go because it was imposed in every public school. So we had to extend the years of study in going from 4 to 5, and then not only from 4 to 5, but construct 3 plus 2 and making 5. So I decided to say that's not a problem. We should not think of it as a problem, but as a positive construction. But maybe that's my way of dealing with bureaucracy, with institution. I didn't mention it, but I worked for 10 years in France, and I say that because France is extremely heavy in its administration. And I run 2 museums in France, and I had a lot of conflict with my politicians and administrative. But I learned also to play with language and nomenclature, and what is imposed. You can also look at it and say, okay, that's the wording, but they are only words. And now, what do I do, with this wording out of administrative or programming or education parameter? So that's what we did 4 years and a half ago. We said, let's open up the master, and from the master go back in the bachelor program to change certain parameters. So what we did, we created 3 new masters, because the master were very much linked under the ministry name imposed by discipline, like painting, sculpture, film, drawing, I don't know, cartoons, cinema d'animation. So we said, let's create, and it was a contradiction because ERG is extremely transdisciplinary, but without excluding the mediums, but saying from its birth, it has this pluridisciplinaire atelier, which are platform mixing theory, practice, disciplines, etc. And that has irrigated the school all along our history. It's its story. But we thought we need to change wording. I am a believer that if we start to change the words, then things can be reopened. And I'm going to read it because I translated because it's in French, so I don't know. So we opened 3 masters. One is called Arts Practice Critical Tools. Another is called Narration and Experimentation. And another is called Graphic Politics and Experimentation. So there are words, but we found collectively those words, and those words were the way to make a statement. To say, we are not going to continue under sculpture, painting, etc. But saying that, it doesn't mean we erase the disciplines, and the savoir-faire, etc. We still paint, sculpt, make animation, cinema animation, film, edit, etc. But in one way, the school was acting in very different ways and only being clustered in this discipline, but they were not calling it. So the fact of forcing the ministry or the academic authority to recognize other wordings, which are these ones, collectively we decided could have been others. It was a way to say you need to recognize our way of functioning, which cannot fit the costume of this educational pragmatic standardization that has been floating around many art schools in Europe. I don't know the history really. That would be very interesting.
The art school.
Yeah, how that was. What are you naming your? How is it called? Your different sections.
Fine arts and art history, right?
This is
But
the-
in the fine art.
Yeah, so now supposedly we should, starting next year, we should have, we already have like studio arts. That's the art history. And the MA is going to be art history
And
with the
curative.
emphasis on curatorial studies.
Okay, but that's very different than the
Studio art.
studio arts, right?
A different course, yeah.
Or do you share?
Yes,
Oh.
so this is studio art, they take history and theory.
Yeah.
Yes, so there's at least over, so when you work on credits and semesterial courses.
Yeah.
So that's the literary arts model that we can.
I mean, we're not
So now-
there yet to sort of like come up with a post-studio structure.
Yeah.
I think that's where, what you mean also by experimentation, right? There are lots of questions related to skill and the authority of the skill that is not here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to rebel against the authority of skill, you have to have an authority of skill, in a sense. And this is the
Yeah.
dilemma in the studio arts program, especially.
Because you once told me, Corinne, some time ago, that in Bruxelles, and has a resumed depth in part because around and there are these other art schools.
Yeah, there is
One of them
many
is a
art
fine art academy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that makes a big difference.
Yeah, and that's why I emphasize this history of air. You know that it was the 1972 school experimental, in one way. So air kind of kept that as a way to be able to do differently than the Art Academy of Brussels or Lacan, who is a very big school and old school, who is very good school, but work more on the notion of atelier. You enter an atelier and you pursue your years in an atelier with an artist. And doesn't function like
we
that.
haven't gone to the Deleuze and Guattari model then.
Mhm.
We haven't reached the Deleuze and Guattari model of the post structure in art, no?
What do
In
you
art
mean?
schools, like the kind of experimentation that linked theory with the arts and sort of deterritorialized the way that a studio teaching art as a discipline would look like in that sense.
Here we have it.
No, but I'm
Well,
at the school. Sure, yes.
Yeah. Well, ERG has been much more theoretical than the other schools in Brussels. So there is quite a lot of theory. But we consider that theory is not separated
Right.
of artistic practice. Then it depends how you imply it, And it's a challenge, it's a complicated question. How do you deal with this relation of theory and artistic practice? But when students apply, we always tell them that they have to think before to come to our school, because there is quite a lot of theory. And if they don't want to engage in theory, we recommend them to go to Lacan or to the Académie des Beaux-Arts of Brussels or to Lucas, which is another big school, Flemish. But it's we are still questioning today in ERG how to play this relation of theory and practice on the very early level, when we have very young people arriving, because some have, for example, already acquired a lot of knowledge in philosophy, for example. Some arrive and they are they are
I mean,
very...
so, I mean, but it is an but you're saying it's an interdisciplinary air around it as opposed to closed off.
Yeah, but we, as I said, we don't, interdisciplinary doesn't cancel, doesn't erase the notion of discipline and medium.
Right.
I think we are not at all in the configuration that, everybody does every disciplines and shares things. No, we still have, people, some artists who, if they want to do painting for 4 years, they do painting for 4 years. But they would never be alone in a painting atelier. They would constantly be confronted to different practice, different discussion, crossing things. So let's say during the week, it's not that the students spend a lot of time only in a painting atelier, etc. So there is this collective, it's extremely collective, there is a lot of collective moment.
But if you allow me, because I've read the books, Corinne, where he explained what the principle of school is. And I think it has nothing at all to do with what you are talking about, like French post-structuralism and stuff like that. It's basically the Bauhaus method of art education. In the fine art school, like here, AUB or the Brussels Fine Art Academy, the artist or the student is invited to train to learn a discipline, a skill, like painting, sculpting, drawing. In the Bauhaus, and if you remember, there is this famous Bauhaus diagram where all the materials go around the central word, which is construction. Power,
Which was Gropius.
Yeah, so the students in this school, they study materials rather than skills, in a way, right? Like you can say.
Yeah, but Bauhaus, if you look the program of Gropius, and his, I don't know if it's because the same scheme, but the famous scheme of Gropius, there is no discipline notion. If you look at this scheme, there is no discipline. Then there is in the structuration of Italia. But the program of Gropius, if you look, I don't know if we had it, I don't remember, but it all goes to Bau, but there is
glass, food,
but there is no notion of discipline. But then how the Bauhaus was implemented was linked to atelier, because you had the metal atelier, the wood atelier,
the workshop.
The workshop. But that's what was the strength, is the workshop were very strong, with very performative in sharing knowledge of this medium and in the workshop, but they were constantly cross-irrigated and put in challenge with other medium. That's, I think, what was the challenge.
So you still have the disciplines?
Like you would unroll like in the metal workshop, or you would unroll with Schlemmer, who would do the stage, who was the head of the stage, but with Moroli Naoji, etc. And so you still had this, I call it savoir-faire, one way I prefer, this atelier of savoir-faire, which we emphasize a lot in air, that the idea is this knowledge allow you to be freer. I mean, this incredible knowledge of different way of activating your practice, then allow you to circulate in very much different way. But today, Thierry Deduve, in the text I mentioned, he just wrote a new text about his experience and about how he thinks today about the art school. He's highly criticizing Bauhaus today. And it's very interesting because he said, I made a mistake. I made a mistake in my thinking of Erg at beginning. Because I think, and it goes to Duchamp, which we were speaking, I think after Duchamp, you have to change one thing. It's you can only say art in general. Like, if after Duchamp you can make art, so-called with anything, so let's speak of art in general and of no finality. Art with no finality. And let's think this way. Everything which is not art in general is very radical today. Everything which is not art in general become professionalizing. So that should not be in the art school.
But if,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, I just wanted to ask you because I was also in young Fanatic Academia in Holland. This was a Catholic art school, as you said, all of these schools, they were Catholic art schools, fine arts, right? They had paintings. I arrived there, I remember they still had departments like painting and stuff. At the time I graduated, they didn't have anything. There were all of these workshops. You can do whatever. You can do wood, stone, metal, paper, everything. But it was called art in general, right? It's he speaks about, you know. So don't you think that this art education model, art in general, let's call it, is now everywhere in a way? Because like I've seen the Cologne art school
and go to the École des Beaux-Arts of Paris.
It's still fine arts?
It's still fine art, and you enroll in an atelier, and you are in an atelier for 5 years.
Wow.
It doesn't mean you cannot cross things, but you are attached to an atelier with an artist for 5 years, and then there is other artists intervening, and it's not completely closed, that's not what I'm saying. But it's kind of still on this model. It's typical school of France. Huh? But for us, what maybe is very important, it's this school should be a place where there is a critical space and a constructive space about choices, about what is aesthetic choice, what is artistic practice in a defined project, and isn't it also the role of an art school to be a place where you discuss and where a student is able to question its choice, its position, its, I don't know. But for us it seems very important this question of being confronted to this choice. And to the construction of a project which implies decision, and which kind of decision you make, artistic decision, aesthetic position, form, which form, you know, and we do emphasize a lot that it's in one way it's this articulation of collectiveness, of you know, collective construction versus is with this individual project and position, and how that works. And we really underline this relationship. But I don't know here, how do you?
I have a question.
Actually, not about here, but generally speaking, about this relationship between, let's say, art schools and the general notion of art, but also, of course, the way the contemporary art world works, that, of course, you cannot reduce the general notion of art to the functioning of the contemporary art world. But sort of like both art historians, as well as art schools, often have a, like, there's a belatedness of catching up with practices that are shaping what we call the art world. So like the art schools might be, you know, cut up there in their, you know, ateliers and so on, and the art historians still using, you know, older conceptual tools and terminologies to understand what is happening now. But I'm thinking like if this, if we take the general notion of art as this, as this ground where there's ground where there's no grounding in specific disciplinary skills, right? Like sort of a post-studio and so on. I mean, yes, it is a general notion of art, but at the same time it becomes a bit too general in a sense that in terms of skill and de-skilling, and I'm remembering here John Roberts, it's aligned and misaligned, mostly aligned with the general notion of social labor. Let's say artists having competencies in writing, in managerial tools of marketing their own works, in speaking, in presenting, like we had, Hassan Khan was like so articulate about his work. So you need to have those tools that are from the larger sort of general social technique. But then, I mean, it's a bit too aligned at the same time with dominant economy where you have to multitask.
Well, me, now I can only speak for me and not for her. We are a multiplicity of voices and we disagree on many things, and that's very healthy. But me, I would be very careful about what you just spoke. I think today there is certain course, for example, certain schools who I see have, have undressed certain contents in their program to reinforce the transmission of and knowledge of certain strategies, which has to do with contemporary art. We refuse. Art doesn't do any of that. We are like very different than goldsmiths, for example. We don't even discuss that as a position. It's voluntary. First, we think art doesn't equal contemporary art. I mean, and then, yes, we work with our contemporaries, but our contemporaries, students, young artists, are not forcibly the contemporary art, because contemporary art is a space which excludes a lot of artists. At least it's a position I think we share with many else. So we think this idea of managerial or strategy of understanding of the contemporary art for us is not a priority. And I know it's very contested. Even some students would. It's very interesting. We have discussion, but that's for us very important. This position.
But you understand that you're also troubled by the alignment of the art education with the current art market. You're asking how not to do this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you share actually the position.
But if you allow me, is it possible to avoid contemporary art? Like, is it possible?
We are not saying we should
avoid
it. Not at all. I think it's very good if some of the people coming out of art school are also benefiting of the art market. It's not the question of saying, but I don't think that art school is the place to orientate the pedagogical program towards those strategies. Then I'm not saying, there is an evil and not at all, but we are very sensitive to what defines this contemporary art and this art market and how we position our experimentation. And we, as we said, we prefer to think of this artistic practice as, choice projects, things. And I think if you build up a confidence, you build up place where you have critical tools towards your choices, and you will position yourself. You know, you will articulate your relation, but I don't think so the place is the art school. That's very, as I say, personal position that I share with some of my colleagues, but
So for you, the art school in part has a role in building a certain distance
yeah.
from what is current.
Yeah, and not only from, you know, the contemporary art and let's say the power being played in it, but we can extend it because it's a microcosm which can be open. But I think we have to share certain strengths towards all these parameters which is installed in controlling our life in social pattern. And the contemporary art is not excluded of those larger frames.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's, and yeah, we are citizens in our school. So, how do we deal with this question of citizenship in relation to certain fields we are active?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something I'm grappling with right now, which is that, is it possible to say that contemporaneity is something to always be invented? That contemporary art, as we more or less kind of know it now, is perhaps one articulation of contemporaneity. So if you develop an art school, how would you develop a curriculum through which students, as they graduate, feel, you know, that they have enough tools with which to propose another iteration of contemporaneity?
I mean, with me the problem that contemporary art is like a cloud, which, you know, it's an abstract concept that it exists in the world that is not unfolding, because it creates the possibilities of art production, distribution, display, exchange. So you cannot say, I mean, I wouldn't know, I don't know how to say that you can avoid contemporary art, because there are a lot of art groups now who claim that they avoid contemporary art and they call to come back to the skill, to what Chernobyl speaks about, to the artist being able to make a painting, a drawing, and stuff like that. But the problem is that what is called contemporary art is what used to be called like modernism or postmodernism. It's not the real thing, it's an abstract notion, but it hovers over us and it controls everything you do in terms of art, you know. So if you say, I will avoid that, avoid how? Will you run away on another planet and do art there? I mean, that's the, I'm trying to
But
understand.
it's not a question of avoiding. I think we cannot avoid, like we cannot avoid the world we are being run. I really like this expression of Maurizio Lazzarato, that today we are governing by the debt, avec la dette, par la dette, with, by, la dette, the debt. We are all touched by that. Students are very much touched. Huh? You know the story of how many percentage of students are being in debt. It's amazing, absolutely amazing.
France, in Belgium, in the EU? Because I know this problem in the US.
Not so much in Belgium and France. There is still a few countries which, but you know, it's for how long we don't know. Huh? We have a very strong pushing conservative movement to go in towards privatization, but there is still a lot of resistance and it will not happen still for a moment, but we know it's not excluded from our environment. So, but mean, now in a lot of countries, not only United States, in South America, in Asia, in many countries. In the UK, student like that. No, I'm making a detour, but because for me that's very interesting. You know, how do we deal with, we speak of this, you know, parameter, imposed parameter of certain organization of the contemporary art, but as I said, it's a microcosm we can extend larger to social pattern we all share and live and we discuss. How do we position ourselves about this configuration of, you know, being in a neoliberal system which affect also students and the organization of studies and the economy of it. And it goes to research, for example. Now we have constituted a group in Belgium of directors of schools, music, theater, cinema. We have good cinema school, quite strong, that help us. Visual arts, you know, all type of school existing. And we have decided now to create a legal body. We have founded. And where we say we want to receive the research money for the arts, not anymore through the national scientific department, but directly to this legal body, because we want to assess how is it sold, this so-called research in art. Because what is being slowly going now in Europe, it's a uniformization of the notion of research based on scientific experience and academic models. And we don't want to be run by these academic models. So, and why I'm going to that, I'm doing a detour for a good reason, it's we all say, oh, but research has been, you know, exponential, it's more and more. But now if you analyze, there is, I'm looking for his name in my head, but he will come back. There is a fantastic anthropologist, American, who have worked only on this question of what meant invention, research, just after World War II and during the Cold War, and where do we stand today? And we see that today with the privatization and financing research and the bureaucracy, because it has to do with that, with the bureaucracy that now handle the research, research has to be so much wording out before even to take place, you know, with kind of a sense of what will come at the end of financing this research, that the real notion of invention has completely shrunk. If you analyze what happened from just after World War II to today. And it's very interesting. You understand why I'm doing this link? Because it has to do with that.
No, but your school is called research artistic, right?
Yeah.
So that's a different model than the fine art, where in fine art you're supposed to study a skill. Here you don't study, you do research. You do research,
No.
right? No, at least that's
for me, in skills you have research. And here maybe that's a very important discussion. Where starts research, where ends research? Do we want research to be one of these, you know, research in art which would be detached from artistic practice?
But isn't this part of the post-Duchampian art, understanding of art, that the artist discovers mediums. Artist doesn't study a skill to paint, but artist does experiment, does research, and he or she discovers new ways to produce art. Isn't that, in a way, one of the ideas?
Yeah, but when you separate you separate this notion of discovery of research with a practice. I think you cannot separate it. Even Duchamp didn't separate it. Duchamp was incredible. He had so much skills. He spent so much time. We never emphasize that in Duchamp. We always come with Duchamp, the guy who takes something and but he was spending a lot of time dealing with materiality. Look at the Grand Verre. The Grand Verre is so much about a state of transformation of materials. I mean, the erosion, the different material used on the glass is so important. And all I was speaking to Walid about the notes of Duchamp in the green box. The notes of Duchamp is like a mode d'emploi for the Grand Verre. And it's amazing when you look at these notes, how precise, how about affect, matière, materiality, medium, erosion, transformation. It goes so far in that. And that has to do with this relation of thought, affect, matière. How to say matière? Matter. Thank you. Matter. I like, you stop me when you are bored, because when I start, please, because I digress. But I made a little book in French, only in French. It was a political thing to do it in French. Because for me, one of the most extraordinary person who analyzed and understood Duchamp was Richard Hamilton. And Richard Hamilton is this English, you know Richard Hamilton? Yeah? English artist who was part of the so-called English pop movement. And he was extremely skillful in different things. He was an expert in, he followed every new technology about printing. He was obsessed with that. So he would always have all these tools with him to innovate, new way of working with new techniques of printing. He was extremely interested in computer right at the beginning. He was commissioned to design a computer by Bell. And he in MoMA, the two first computers in the design collection was Apple and Hamilton Bell computer, which is interesting, you know. So he's very much someone obsessed about, technology, matter, and the invention and so. But so very young he got interested in the notes, which are in the green box of Duchamp, which are all mixed, right? There is no order. And so he got really involved in these notes. They are mostly in French. He speaks quite badly French. He does understand, but he's not an expert in French. But he goes in it, and he writes to Duchamp in 57 maybe, I don't know. And with a proposition. He doesn't know Duchamp. He writes him with a diagram of interpretation of his note. And he said, here is my diagram. And he said, I would like to typographically translate your notes. It's so interesting, I mean, this idea of typographically translate the note. So Duchamp does an answer for 1 year, but after 1 year answer and said, wonderful, your diagram. Yes, please go show me what you want to do, etc. So he does translate the note in English, but that's only a small part. He really made typographic spacing in page of the notes to make a book, which he would call the Green Book, with an order, etc. Anyway, it's a long story. The book is being published. They become very friends. And Duchamp called Hamilton his best the person best decipher his work. In French, which is supposed to be with the American, the great thinkers of Duchamp, right? These numerous artists, historians, philosophers have been written on Duchamp. They totally ignore Hamilton. Hamilton has written texts on Duchamp, has worked with him, has traveled to Pasadena for his first retrospect. They ignore Duchamp. There is nothing on Hamilton and his work on Duchamp. So it's very interesting. Why? Then the Grand Verre break, you know the story, is in Philadelphia, we cannot move the Grand Verre. The Tate said to Duchamp, let's do a retrospective. And, but they cannot take the Grand Verre from Philadelphia, you will never move again as it's broken. So Duchamp says there is one person can redo the Grand Verre, it's Hamilton. So Hamilton does the Grand Verre, but what interests me in all these stories, one fact, is Hamilton doesn't say, oh, I'm going to do a copy, I'm going to... He had seen in Philadelphia the Grand Verre, but he doesn't say, I'm going to spend days, months in Philadelphia copying the Grand Verre. No, he said, oh, fine. He had deciphered the notes, right? He said, I'm just going to go through the notes and do the Grand Verre from the notes. And what then he goes, it's in all this matter. It's through the way Duchamp has articulated matters, not only, but that's so important in Grand Verre. And Hamilton becomes such a precise analyzer of what is in this configuration of transformation of these matters. That the Grand Verre of Hamilton is exceptional. So answering by that about this notion of Duchamp. I think yes, but let's be careful about this question, you know? I don't know if you see what I'm
I
trying
do,
to
but
say.
it's interesting, but I still think that Hamilton, what he does is basically research, right? And the old school principle was more about to respect the tradition of the old masters and not be allowed to get out. I mean, that's how usually the art schools, the so-called old schools work. Like you are signing it with a famous artist and you must do exactly what the famous artists do. And then when you do exactly like the famous artist, then you are free to experiment and to do your own work. And in this new principle of art schooling, you are free from the youngest age to experiment and to do exactly what Hamilton, Duchamp, and all of them does. Just engage in your own research of material, Grand Verre.
Actually, what is interesting is that sometimes you see these two models coming together. My example is, this sort of like the structure of art education in Cairo, which is very, very entrenched in, of course, bureaucracy, but in fine arts as well, in the traditional notion of master-disciple relationships. And it's a huge structure. It's a huge public structure of art education. And then once in a while you have artists who try to reform that structure from within, like Ahmed Bassouni, who died in 2011 during the revolution, or Shelby himself, who is an educator and artist. But they do it through, let's say, they adapt this sort of model of artistic research, and they bring in new competencies and skills, such as new media, research, conceptual understanding, merging art and science with other fields and so on and so forth. But then, even in those cases, this model still prevails of master-disciple. So you have experimentation, but when you look at these students' work, you can still distinguish, like, this student did this video, she's like, or he is this master's disciple. So you have like a change of media and a change of understanding of artistic competencies and skills. but still the structure dynamic between, like in relation to tradition, authority, heritage, whatever you want to call it, the father figure doesn't change.
Mhm.
It's an interesting amalgam that I don't think we have in Beirut because the public art sector is not
Yes.
so pronounced.
But I remember actually when I was taking Karen's class last semester, she said that when she saw the work, I think, of your students a few years ago, like a while back, not recently, she said that all their work seemed to reproduce yours.
Possibly. Yeah, true. I mean, when I began teaching, after a few years, I noticed that I was much too engaged and invested in the work of my students. And it takes a long time to learn how to let them be.
What's that? So how do you let them be?
Exactly.
It's just
These are, I'm thinking about one difference that I feel right now about my teaching, compared with my teaching years ago, is that I'm no longer loyal to what is called contemporary art. When I began teaching, it was all quite new, and I thought that I could that's what I could offer to the graphic design students. And so I got invested in the installations and like that. And I seem to be providing the tools and the strategies. With time, especially with my move to the fine art studio art program, I'm not so eager to converse with my students only about what is contemporary art. I find a great pleasure and a very generous space of conversation, let's say, talking around drawings or paintings. And this brings me, I wanted to add to the conversation, is that one thing I find that could help within this dilemma is the profile of the teacher. The question would be, is that rather than to go to move to a kind of post-studio or post-medium or post-Duchamp education, to say, yes, we could do this. What about, though, is it possible to find someone to direct the studio or to teach, right? Let's say drawing, but from the position of someone who has already betrayed that tradition. So you teach drawing, but you never embody the authority of that particular skill. You say, yes, we will look at Nicolas Poussin, not because Nicolas Poussin is what you should be when you grow up, but we can think through Nicolas Poussin. What you will do with it, I don't know. So you teach traditions from the position of a heretic. But heretics understand that which they're destroying rather than the faithful. But they're not invested in maintaining it. So I think, and I wonder if an artist, you see this debate is seems to be very pressing to studio art or the studio environment. I wanted to ask Angela, possibly, and Octavio. It seems obvious, or let's say it seems unproblematic that an artistic program can give courses, let's say, in history of the Renaissance still, even after what happened in the 20th century. I could be wrong, but why does it seem from a distance that it's unproblematic, an artistic program? Beyond the obvious that you study history.
Yeah. I don't know if there's anything beyond the obvious. I mean, in the sense that, this transmission of skill that, like, you have to historicize Poussin, right? When you show Poussin to your students, you don't tell them to reproduce Poussin.
Right.
That's precisely sort of the historicizing move that happens. So I think it's similar in our classes that, but also the tradition of art history is much younger than artistic practice.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, there are all these rebellions in the 60s and 70s against the authority of art historical tradition, iconography, or from Gombriew to Panofsky to all these models of art historical surveys that came from post-structuralism, feminism, even social art history. But at the same time, the discipline itself is younger, so like you cannot reproduce, like you cannot go to the Renaissance and you cannot critique the mode of historicizing during the Renaissance because history itself is a very young profession. It's a very young invention which dates to, let's say, the 18th, 19th century. So in a way, like it's kind of like while teaching history, while reinventing is a bit more ingrained in art historical practice than in artistic practice. In addition to the fact that also, I mean, of course, the whole notion that of this romantic engagement with material and the artist as a romantic figure, it's also a product of art history in many ways.
Yeah.
So my long answer is that, or short answer is that I really don't have an answer except that like in art history at least now, you don't teach students how to reproduce, let's say, like Panofsky's iconographic model.
Right.
But again, you like open up a variety of methodologies, tools, and like competencies in interpretive engagement.
Okay, but the Renaissance as a corpus is still something to think through.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if we can transpose this into the studio. I was saying, we don't learn how to draw like Poussin, but Poussin is still something we can study, not to do another Poussin. You know, so it's about reinventing methods of interpretation, not excluding, right, works that happened, let's say, before Duchamp.
Isn't this like a debate that goes on since the 16th century when they used to have those struggles, fights between the ancients and the moderns, you know, and some scholars in the French Academy would say we need to go back to the classics to study the classics in order to understand what to do after, and then others said, no, ignore the classics, let's go forward. And, you know, that I experienced this in the post-Soviet art school.
Yeah.
So at the time when half of the faculty were arguing that an artist must first learn the skill of the professor, or let's say how to draw and paint, only after you can engage in experimenting. And other people were saying, no, you don't need to learn anything, you just engage in experimenting. This is a dialectical, it's a conflict between this Asian model of the classicist model and the modern one. And I don't think we have an answer here. I mean, these debates go on for like 500-600 years, so I don't think we will answer it right now. But it's something just to be aware of them. But what you're saying, I'm a little bit worried that if you say that let's look at Poussin without trying or aspiring or trying to be Poussin, we'll end up in a kind of amateurism, you know, like a dilettante. I mean, you need to, if you really want to understand Poussin, you need to be able to draw like him, right? If you just say, we will look at his work and say, okay, we understand him now, let's move on. Do you think that's enough? Or would you rather stay and say, let's be as skillful, as good at drawing as him, and then we see what happens? I mean, I'm asking.
Can we answer with like specifics? I'll go back to this because it's good. Interesting. So I'll give you an example. I teach the first drawing course. Right? One exercise we do, right, is that we pick paintings. Poussin is one of them, and students that get clay and they make a three-dimensional replica of a painting, and we put the clay model in a box, and we shine a light on it. So it's like so you get basically the general configuration, right? And then we draw from it. And when you draw from it, you begin to understand what Poussin was doing. And of course, this is 2 weeks. Right? The results that come out are very strange, right? I mean, they're very skillful. It will take you 10 years to draw like Poussin. Should we go and spend 10 years to do like Poussin, or are those 2 weeks enough now? And then move on, and so you're gathering actual experience with the challenge, but the task is not Poussin. It seems that but going through Poussin for 2 weeks is important to accumulate something else,
But I mean, it's a similar kind of temporality. Like today, I mean, when we teach courses, right, it's a sample of this and this and that. Like we can't afford, let's say, to spend one semester or even like 1 month just like sitting and reading Kant's aesthetic theory. We cannot do that. It's a different kind of temporality of engagement with.
But you engage with the difficulty at least once, okay? You sense the difficulty. Maybe that's important, right? To avoid being an amateur or a dilettante. I don't know.
That's a good question. I don't know how. But who knows? Maybe we should aspire to find an art education that you stay for 1 year with Kant aesthetic theory, because you may get more from staying 1 year with just reading Kant aesthetic theory than staying 1 year and going through all of them without.
But wouldn't it be possible to have all that?
In one
Time.
No, but all that, not all, not everybody, but that all that can exist for different people.
How? Give us a
No, what I'm hearing is that if a student wants to stay 1 year on Kant, isn't it possible? And if a student wants to stay 6 months drawing,
can you do this at the end?
yeah, I think more or less.
Yeah.
I mean, with some arrangement, but
And the
more or
master's
less,
program or the-
more or less. But if we see it's really strong, we will protect this commitment. It's about this project I'm speaking, you know.
But at the master's level or at the
Even bachelor, I mean, maybe not only a little negotiation will be discussed, but why not? You know, why not?
I think we're trying to do it with these extracurricular workshops and lectures. This is where we spend for more focus. But within the class, because you cannot ask a teacher to step out and follow that particular focus. The system doesn't allow it. You have so many things to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. With some negotiation, but we would try to protect at least, you know, the maximum. Like this person can. I mean, if someone wants to do animation, like drawing animation, like that, okay, maybe he should, you know, because we have a point of challenge the collective exchange and critical space, so he cannot stay in his corner. But he could come with this thing.
But it comes at the extent, I mean, it comes at this kind of level of, you know, there's the dominant institutional time that is given to you, and then you try to carve out some more time for yourself within that. Not that, you know, things are going to change institutionally in the sense that now we are going to slow down and offer this, you know, one course on drawing Prussard, or one course on like reading Hegel's phenomenology, but within the institutional temporality, like you are saying, you can carve out times. But I don't know what this carving out does to the dominant mode of learning. For instance, next semester we're offering an entire new course by my colleague, who's probably upstairs now, on one essay, which is Benjamin's The Work of Art in the Age of Technical Reproducibility. Just one semester long course on that essay. This is a kind of an intervention that slows down the temporality of surveys that we're also expected to do.
How did you make that decision? How did you
convince yourself that it's not have negative repercussion on the general education of students, like slow that down too much.
It's good if it is a negative repercussion on their general education. Not that they're going to be specialists on Benjamin, but how you can take one text and open it up towards so many other problematics that the text itself draws.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a starting point, right? You can like have an entire survey, and you can do that survey through, let's say, the problematic of Duchamp. Or you can have one text and starting from the text open up to...
But this is also an old problem, because in the former times, people in the classics or in the philosophy departments, they used to exactly study like this. They would have, for 1 year, they would have one book, and they would go line by line. The professor would go first line, and then everyone speaks about the second line. So that's how it used to be. So do we want to go again to that?
No, I wasn't suggesting that.
No,
like the thickness of the text itself or the richness of the text can open up so many other like engagements with it. Like you can take the text and open it up to like our post-media condition, to the notion of the apparatus, and what technical reproducibility does in relation to history and time.
But as we try to think, it's not always easy because there is structures and, but we try to think that discursive and practical tools have to be appropriated and transformed by the student in relation to their project.
Hopefully first appropriated, then.
Yeah, yeah. And in relation to the project, and also this appropriation sometimes, as we know, goes towards things we cannot anticipate. It's impossible to anticipate what, So that's why maybe we are so emphasizing the idea of projects with these students.
Yeah.
So there is this sense of, in one way, of being very much, in these trans-artistic dialogues and these platforms, etc. But on the other hand, we are very attentive to this notion of a student project.
But it's also, I think, because we live in another world. Like in the past, you would go to the store and you would buy bread and come home and eat bread. Now you go to the supermarket for all of this. No? The same translates in the classroom, right? You don't only count on what you don't bread. You want to try everything. So that's why you go through all of this. So it could be even impossible or hard to even try to make everyone interested.
What do you think on this?
Exactly what you say.
I mean, actually, with the seminar, I started to feel like I wish we spent more time with, Hegel has been popping up in almost all my classes, but it's only we scrape a bit and we scrape different things, and I feel like it's the end of the semester, and I just want to retake it.
But you have possibility of taking philosophical course, of anthropology course, you can.
Yeah, but it's like
We're
still on the surface. We never dig.
But my question is more, do you have can you choose course in relation to your project and say I want to go choose this anthropological course for 1 year?
We have general education requirements. So they have pools, they say you have to take 2 courses in social sciences, natural history, so they choose, and it's possible
But
to
it
make...
works the other way around. I think that it's not so much that you're working on a project and then you pick the courses according to your project. It's that you pick courses that you may be interested in, and somehow they open up. But it's
it
also
goes in both ways always. No?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think that at some point I was really lost. I was thinking that maybe I wanted to move to anthropology or to something else, because I was just doing a bit of this, a bit of that, and I felt I wanted some kind of interdisciplinarity, but at the same time with more depth. Right now, I feel like there are massive gaps in a lot of the different things.
But you will have
You
all
will
the
see.
time.
We
matter. It's a matter. Then you take
Yeah.
initiative. Because that's a feeling, I don't know, we all know.
Yeah.
We have all our lives.
Life is a realization.
But then you start to make choice.
Yeah.
You start to say, oh, I'm going to prove this guy is, and I'm going to give the time to go in his thinking because it challenged my...
Is here at AUB something called, I think it's called independence studies?
You
because
can do it.
you can-
I mean, I don't know if it works with the
You
department,
can
but I know
do
that
that.
someone I know in anthropology, who, I mean, you have to have a certain, I think, like minimum GPA requirement or whatever. But she did, I think, a semester independent study where she worked on her own, like on her own research, and had someone who was overlooking that.
But I think that's only for a way.
No.
For undergrads as well.
But she was an undergraduate student, so I mean, I don't know if it's possible within one department.
But I mean, also, like, you shouldn't expect, I mean, you should expect a lot from education, but it's not like, it's a way for you to unlearn, in a sense, and then you go on. I mean, for instance, like, I did my first BA and my BA and my first MA, there was never a contemporary art course available, contemporary art history or any theory course available. So it's all about, I mean, most of it is also about self-learning, that you don't cling to sort of authority.
Yeah, I mean, even if you are like the
walls.
best universities, you won't find an expert in Hegel's art theory, for instance, or in Kant's judgment, because they don't have. All these are very few people who
Yeah.
you are lucky if you end up in the same place. So a lot of the time, you just, I don't know, just try to find out yourself who can help you in what you're interested in.
Well, I had written this little thing, but because of what you speak, I'm just going to read you this deadline, because I think it has to do also with that. Through the sharing of diverse artistic experiences, what is at stake is the grounding of a certain knowledge regarding the studied material, but also in relation to an idea of art, as well as to constantly evolving acts and a form seeking emancipation. And we go back to that, but I think it has a lot to do with this question. In the face of the dominant narrative presiding the field of artistic practice, or more generally, of the narratives that rule our social life, and to offer a space embracing experimentation as well as what had not yet been sought or experienced, constituting the very moment of the practice. And why that is important? Because this notion of knowledge is in this movement of emancipation and of act and form, allow you then to make some choice in what you say, but then you start to make choice, and choice means to put aside certain things. And that's where there is an emancipation about the general narrative. You make decision of what is building, is meaningful in your own construction. And I think it's a very important, and for me art school has to do with that, very much.
I mean, I think that's, I don't know, I feel like maybe if we introduce something like an independent study, that would be immensely more useful, because I feel like, what I have tried to do since I started is try to get the things that I would get from one class, but then let's say I want to, like I'm taking this class because I want to read Hegel, and then I spend like the first, I don't know, like let's say 12 weeks doing something else until we get there. So it's like I'm doing all this other stuff that are from these other disciplines, which maybe do not feed into my direct interests, because that's the way that, you have to take credit courses. And like those in this room to just be, I'm interested in this and this and this, unless it's within the space of a paper, which is, 2,000 words, and we have, a few weeks only, or even less. So it just seems like there's too little time on the undergraduate level to develop, maybe, like...
Why is it only undergraduate?
We don't have a graduate program yet. Next year.
Do you wish to have or not? Bye, it was nice to see you.
We don't have anything soon with yours, but maybe in the next 4 or 5 years. But in art history and curating, it's going through for next year. It's next fall, yeah. It's a young department, and yeah. I mean, it was sort of brought, it was sustained by these people who stayed during the Civil War, and then it got revamped only about 7 or 8 years ago.
Would you be favorable to
A graduate program.
graduate program?
I think already the questions in the
Yeah,
I think
because-
they already are, it's a maturity that requires a graduate program.
Yeah.
Like you read.
Yeah.
Because that's what I hear.
Like you
Yeah.
grew over the BA now,
Mm-hmm.
and your expectations are asking for something else.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the.
Yeah, because what we see in our school is a lot of students
Color.
do these
Thank you very much. See you
3
later.
Some don't.